Scientists discovered Queen Elizabeth II's DNA contained markers that should have been impossible given her documented ancestry. The results suggested royal bloodlines had been contaminated by commoner genetics centuries ago. Royal genealogists spent generations protecting lineage secrets from public scrutiny. Genetic analysis finally cracked the code palace records could not hide. How many royal dynasties were founded on carefully constructed lies? For centuries, the British monarchy has projected an image of genetic exceptionalism, a bloodline so pure and noble that it justified their divine right to rule. Palace genealogists maintained meticulous family trees stretching back a millennium, creating an unbroken chain of aristocratic descent that appeared flawless to the outside world. These were not just family records, they were political documents, carefully crafted to legitimize power. Royal marriages were strategically arranged, not just for political alliances, but to preserve what they called noble blood, the genetic material supposedly superior to that of the common people they ruled. What few realized was the extent to which court historians systematically sanitized these bloodlines. Inconvenient ancestors disappeared from official records. Embarrassing connections were erased. The genealogical record became less a historical document and more carefully constructed propaganda. The monarchy's very legitimacy rested on these claims of unbroken aristocratic lineage. If kings and queens were simply ordinary people who happened to seize power, what justified their continued rule? The public's belief in royal genetic superiority helped maintain a rigid class hierarchy that benefited those at the top. This facade remained largely unchallenged for centuries. Questioning royal bloodlines wasn't just impolite, it was dangerous, potentially treasonous. The monarchy controlled the narrative about its own origins, and that narrative was sacred. Any challenge to these claims threatened the very foundation of monarchical authority. But in the 21st century, a new scientific tool emerged that could pierce this carefully maintained veil, and what it revealed would shake the foundations of royal legitimacy. The emergence of genetic genealogy presented an unprecedented challenge to royal historical claims. For the first time, the carefully maintained stories of royal ancestry could be scientifically verified or disproven. Initially, royal family members participated willingly in ancestry research projects. There was little reason for concern. After all, their lineage was among the most meticulously documented in human history. These preliminary tests focused on confirming well-established European royal connections, tracing haplogroups that should link the House of Windsor to other noble houses across the continent. Scientists expected these results to validate centuries of carefully maintained records. The research community prepared papers confirming what everyone already knew, that royal bloodlines were precisely as documented. Testing protocols were rigorous, analyzing both paternal Y chromosome markers and maternal mitochondrial DNA to build a complete genetic picture. The laboratory process was painstaking. Multiple samples were tested independently to ensure accuracy. Researchers used the latest sequencing technology to extract the maximum possible genetic information. They were preparing to either confirm or challenge one of history's most documented bloodlines, and they wanted absolute certainty in their findings. What they didn't realize was that they were about to uncover a secret that had been hidden for centuries, one that would challenge everything we thought we knew about the British monarchy. When the results came back, researchers were stunned. Queen Elizabeth II's genetic markers pointed to populations completely excluded from royal narratives. Her maternal line carried haplogroups commonly found among medieval peasant communities, genetic signatures that should have been absent from the royal bloodline if the official genealogies were accurate. Even more shocking were the paternal markers, which suggested ancestry from regions never mentioned in palace genealogies. These were not just minor discrepancies, they represented fundamental contradictions to the official narrative of royal descent. The genetic timeline painted an even more troubling picture for royal historians. The DNA evidence indicated that the mixing of royal and commoner bloodlines had occurred centuries earlier than anyone had suspected, potentially as far back as the 12th century, during the very formation of what would become the British monarchy. Multiple independent labs confirmed these shocking ancestry patterns. This was not a testing error or contamination. It was genuine evidence that the royal bloodline contained genetic material that should have been impossible according to official records. The results indicated commoner contamination had occurred repeatedly throughout royal history. The carefully maintained image of aristocratic genetic purity was scientifically unsustainable. The bloodline that had justified centuries of rule was, in genetic terms, remarkably ordinary. As researchers dug deeper, they discovered palace archives contained suspicious gaps precisely where genetic evidence suggested problems. Marriage records had been altered, birth certificates modified, and entire family branches pruned from the official royal tree. Court genealogists had systematically elevated minor nobility to hide commoner origins. When genetic evidence pointed to a non-noble ancestor, researchers found that historical records had miraculously transformed that person into a previously unknown minor lord or distant cousin of nobility. Financial records told an even more damning story. Palace accounts showed payments to historians for genealogical corrections, a euphemism for rewriting family history to maintain the illusion of pure bloodlines. Some of Britain's most respected historical scholars had participated in this centuries-long deception. The monarchy had spent generations creating fictional noble ancestors to fill genetic gaps. Whenever commoner blood threatened to taint the royal narrative, court historians invented aristocratic connections. These fabrications became historical fact through repetition and royal authority. DNA revealed the true scope of this historical manipulation. What had been presented as the most well-documented family tree in history was in reality one of history's most sophisticated genetic cover-ups, all designed to preserve the illusion of royal legitimacy. The British monarchy was not alone. Similar DNA testing exposed comparable deceptions across European royal houses. From Spain to Sweden, genetic evidence challenged fundamental assumptions about aristocratic bloodlines that had justified power for centuries. These revelations provided scientific ammunition for modern democratic movements. If royal families had been lying about their genetic exceptionalism, what justified their continued privileges? Royal houses worldwide faced mounting pressure to submit to genetic verification of their historical claims. The concept of genetic democracy emerged, the radical notion that DNA reveals the fundamental equality of human beings, regardless of claimed ancestry. This scientific evidence directly challenged the biological basis of political authority that monarchies had relied on for their legitimacy. The implications extended beyond politics into cultural identity. Nations built around reverence for royal bloodlines faced existential questions. If the blood was not royal after all, what justified the palaces, the wealth, the constitutional powers still held by these families? For monarchy to survive in the genetic age, it would need to find new justifications for its existence, ones not dependent on myths of special blood or divine selection. The biological truth was simpler and more democratic. Royals were genetically indistinguishable from the people they ruled.